The hall was packed. Bright lights from cameras bounced off the wood walls, and the nervous sounds of papers and whispers filled the room. This wasn't just another meeting. It was a setup. Words were weapons, and reputations were on the line. In the middle of it all was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, calm, cool, and knowing that everything she said would be picked apart later. Across from her, ex-Governor Mike Huckabee leaned forward, ready to attack. He was known for this kind of thing on TV. He wasted no time questioning Crockett's honesty in a way that seemed both powerful and blaming. He carefully framed his words, making it about ethics and saying that leaders should not only make laws, but also be good examples. His speech sounded like he was trying to paint Crockett as someone unfit to represent the people because she didn't have the right morals. He talked about truth and responsibility in public office, each sentence designed to put her on the defensive, where most politicians mess up. But Crockett wasn't most politicians. As Huckabee spoke, the room got quiet. Even people who disagreed with him could feel the force of his words. He pointed out what he called her inconsistencies, questioning if her actions matched her words. He wanted a soundbite, the moment where Crockett looked flustered or caught in a lie. Instead, he got silence, then a pause that felt longer than it was. Crockett adjusted her mic slightly, her face calm, her eyes steady. She didn't raise her voice or rush to defend herself. She just let Huckabee's accusations hang in the air, as if waiting for them to collapse on their own. Then she spoke, one sentence that would be heard far beyond that room. "Leader, you can challenge my policies all you want, but you can't challenge my ethics." The room went still. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, with a strength and calmness that made it impossible to twist her words. It wasn't defensive or angry. It was a statement of fact. That one sentence took away Huckabee's power. He came ready for a fight, but she gave him nothing to grab onto. She turned his whole attack into nothing. For a second, Huckabee opened his mouth to keep going, but no words came out. His usual confidence slipped, and the cameras caught it. The slight hesitation, the tight jaw. Reporters scribbled in their notebooks, already knowing the headline. The impact of Crockett's reply wasn't limited to that room. The internet blew up instantly. Clips of her answer spread everywhere, with headlines emphasizing how direct her words were. People from all sides talked about it. Supporters praised her poise, calling it a masterclass in staying calm. Even critics admitted that her delivery was more effective than any rehearsed speech could have been. But what really made the moment resonate was the context. Huckabee wasn't just another critic. He had positioned himself as the moral authority, trying to reduce Crockett to someone unfit to talk about values. By setting the boundaries so clearly, Crockett not only defended herself, but flipped the script. Instead of being on trial, she became the one setting the terms of the debate. As the exchange went on, people behind Huckabee shifted uncomfortably. They expected him to dominate, to trap her with his smooth talk and ethical stance. Instead, they watched as the person he meant to judge became the stronger one, while he struggled to regain his footing. The beauty of Crockett's approach was its simplicity. She didn't need a long speech or to fire back with accusations. One sentence was enough to expose the weakness of the attack. It was a reminder that sometimes power isn't about saying a lot, but about saying the right thing. As the gavel signaled the meeting was moving on, the memory of that moment lingered. Huckabee tried to keep going, changing his questions to safer topics, but the atmosphere had changed. No matter what else was said that day, the story had already been written. Crockett had stood her ground, and her response overshadowed everything else. That night, news channels replayed the clip. Experts broke down the exchange, pointing out how Huckabee's strategy had backfired. Some saw it as a generational clash, others as a shift in how political battles are fought in the age of viral moments. But everyone agreed on one thing. Crockett's one-sentence reply was devastating in its simplicity. By the end of the day, it was clear that this was more than just another argument in D.C. It was a key moment, a reminder of why words matter and how even the sharpest attacks can be turned around with a well-placed phrase, spoken with conviction. After Jasmine Crockett and Mike Huckabee talked, everyone kept repeating that one thing she said. Reporters rushed to get reactions, and TV people prepped their takes for the primetime news. But the real story was still going on inside the hearing room. The quiet after her words wasn't the end of things. It was the start of a change no one saw coming. Huckabee, ready to grill her with tough questions, was now regrouping. His team behind him looked worried. They knew how things looked and that Crockett didn't just hold her own. She turned his attack into a mistake that'd be all over social media. Huckabee kept going, not wanting to give up the spotlight. He leaned in, talking louder, saying Crockett's past didn't match what she said she stood for. He brought up votes, speeches, and chats, trying to show she was wrong. But Crockett stayed calm, waiting for him to finish before
before answering clearly. She did it on purpose, not getting mad, but using his own words to back up her point. People in the room started to notice the difference. Huckabee got louder and pushier, but Crockett got more steady, her words measured and clear. The more he pushed, the stronger she seemed. It was quite a thing to see on camera, a story that didn't need explaining. At one point, Huckabee tried to paint her as a liar, hinting her calls for honesty in government didn't apply to her. He leaned on his past as a leader, talking like he was used to being in charge. But Crockett's answer was simple and direct. She reminded him honesty wasn't a party thing, it wasn't just for one side, and it started with everyone who had power. "Sir, honesty isn't just a slogan, it's a habit," she said, her voice and eyes steady. Those words hit hard. People didn't clap because they had to be respectful, but they definitely acknowledged what she said. For many watching, it was a reminder why these talks mattered. They weren't just about scoring points, they were about what principles really meant. Huckabee switched gears, trying to trap her on policy details, moving from personal stuff to laws and money. He asked about budgets, resources, and priorities that he said didn't match what she preached. But Crockett was ready. She knew once he lost the moral high ground, he'd try to bury her in details. Her answers were sharp and detailed, pointing to data, group reports, and explaining why she made her choices. She showed her choices weren't random, but part of a bigger plan for fairness. With each answer, she took back control of the story, making it clear her policies and values were linked. As they went back and forth, reporters saw Huckabee getting more uneasy. He sounded confident, but he was stumbling. The smooth way he usually talked was now faltering. Every time he tried to trap her, she turned it back on him, sometimes with a small smile, other times with a well-prepared fact that undermined his claims. The audience, limited by the rules, was hooked. Body language spoke volumes. Aides leaned in, pens stopped moving, and everyone watched the exchange. It wasn't just a Q&A anymore, it was a clash of styles, one relying on power and blame, the other on calm and facts. The impact of what was happening was clear even before it ended. On phones everywhere, clips of the exchange were going around. Reporters wrote quick stories, all noting the growing tension. Crockett's name was trending, getting attention not just from political types, but from everyday people who found her calm strength inspiring. Still, things were tense inside. Huckabee, not wanting to lose control of the story, pushed harder. He got louder, letting frustration show as he accused her of dodging responsibility. Again, Crockett answered with a calmness that seemed almost soothing. "Sir, responsibility isn't something you give to others. It's something you live by," she said, her voice steady as always. That line, like the one before, hit like a hammer. It wasn't a speech, not a defense, but a simple idea clearly stated, impossible to twist. The more she talked like that, the more Huckabee's argument seemed messy and unfocused. As the hearing went on, the power had completely shifted. Huckabee, who started in charge, was now trying to regain his footing. Crockett had become known as calm, strong, and unshaken. The cameras caught it all, and people outside would see it their own way, but the feeling was already there. The fight was supposed to reveal weakness. Instead, it showed strength. The attempt to paint her as a liar failed not because she yelled louder, but because she spoke smarter. By sticking to facts and not getting caught up in defensive arguments, she didn't just protect her reputation, she boosted it. When the gavel finally came down, the room seemed to exhale. Reporters rushed out to file their stories, aides gathered their things, and Huckabee leaned back, looking like someone who knew things didn't go his way. But Crockett, though, stayed composed, gathering her papers with the same calm that had carried her through. The story of that day wasn't about accusations or policy fights. It was about staying cool under pressure, about how one line can change everything, and about how calm can be stronger than anger. For Jasmine Crockett, it was a key moment, something that would stay with her long after the cameras were off, and something that made sure her name would be repeated, not in whispers, but in headlines.
The morning after, the hearing was all over the news. Every media outlet replayed the exchanges, showing the clash from their angle. Some focused on Huckabee looking determined, like a veteran politician holding a newbie accountable. Others zoomed in on Jasmine Crockett's calm, praising how she disagreed without getting loud. But one thing was clear, her words hit harder than his questions. Clips of her answers blew up online. Her supporters shared
favored them, yes, but so did commentators who usually disagree on everything. People looked at how she carried herself, her pace, even the way she paused before making an important point. In a world where viral moments fade fast, Crockett's face-off with Huckabee felt like it would stick around. For Huckabee, the aftermath wasn't so great. While his base defended him, many reporters pointed out the flaws in his approach. What was supposed to expose her past instead showed how risky it is to rely too much on moral high ground. His team scrambled to change the subject, talking about how important honesty is, but the story was already out of their control. Inside the Capitol, people were buzzing. Staffers retold the story with a mix of shock and awe. Crockett, often called too loud or direct by her critics, showed a different side, strength under pressure. Even rivals admitted she was impressively composed. They might disagree with her policies, but they couldn't deny how well she handled the situation. This wasn't just a shift in perception. Strategists started to rethink how they saw her as an opponent. Someone who could stay calm while facing harsh attacks was more dangerous than someone who just used fiery rhetoric. Her calmness became a kind of power, making others think twice about underestimating her in future debates. Meanwhile, Crockett acted big nothing special had happened. She went back to her routine, holding meetings, reviewing bills, and talking to constituents. When reporters asked about the hearing, she brushed it off, saying she just answered the best she could. But even in that response, she seemed to know that the moment had taken on a life of its own. The impact was quick. Opinion pieces called her performance a masterclass in political poise. Analysts said her use of simple language without jargon was why her responses resonated. It wasn't the complexity of her arguments, but the directness, the refusal to get bogged down in details when the main point was enough. At schools, teachers used clips from the hearing to start discussions about public speaking and leadership. Students debated whether Huckabee's aggressive style or Crockett's calm counter was more effective. Most leaned toward her, not because she won every point, but because she showed control when the other side faltered. Even comedians found material in the clash. Late-night shows played the clips, some exaggerating Huckabee's confused reactions, others marveling at how one line from Crockett got more attention than a whole speech. Though it was funny, there was also a sense of the real tension that had played out. Behind closed doors, Huckabee's advisors urged him to change his approach. They suggested focusing less on personal ethics tests and more on specific policy criticisms. They admitted that trying to trap her had backfired, creating memorable quotes that helped her instead. But Huckabee, a veteran with years in the public eye, didn't want to back down. His instinct was to come back harder and show he could take control next time. For Crockett, the hearing was both a chance and a burden. With praise came more scrutiny. Every move she made in the following weeks was watched closely. Supporters raised her profile, but opponents looked for any mistake that could even the score. She wasn't just another member of the group anymore. She was someone to watch. Still, the reason she had power in that moment remained simple. She hadn't planned some big strategy or tried to humiliate Huckabee. She trusted that the weight of calm words would carry further than the force of accusations. In a time when quantity often drowns out quality, she had chosen quality, and that choice changed how people saw her leadership. As time passed, the memory of the hearing stayed clear, not because of the policy details, but because of the human contrast it showed. Aggression versus composure, accusation versus idea, yelling versus clarity. It was a reminder that sometimes the strongest answer isn't the loudest, but the most steady. And while Huckabee moved on to new battles and Crockett went back to her work, the story of their clash kept popping up in conversations, classrooms, and online feeds. For one day in that room, politics came down to its simplest form. Two people, two styles, and one truth that lasted long after the gavel fell.
The days after that intense exchange were awkward. Even though the room had cleared, the weight of what was said hung in the air. In government, silence can speak louder than words, and the silence after Jasmine Crockett's comeback said a lot. People whispered about how quickly Huckabee's confidence broke, how the certainty in his tone vanished when she hit him with that one statement. Crockett's team privately celebrated. They knew she'd done something rare, something many experienced politicians can't pull off. She'd flipped a carefully planned attack back on the attacker without even seeming bothered. To her fans, she was a leader with a cool new style, balancing fire with control. But to her critics, she became a problem, a voice they could no longer write off as inexperienced or too blunt. Around the committee, staffers swapped stories about her. They talked about how she leaned in slightly when listening, how she held her notes without looking at them, like she already knew every answer by heart. They remembered that tiny pause before she spoke, a pause that felt like anticipation before she cut through with sharpness. Reporters chased her down hallways, asking if she'd planned the statement, if she knew it would blow up across the news. Crockett brushed them off with the same calm tone she'd used in the hearing. She said it wasn't about planning a moment. It was about speaking truth when the situation called for it. That humility made the public even more fascinated. Huckabee's team, meanwhile, worked overtime. They scrambled to change the story, putting out statements about their bigger ethical concerns, hoping to distract people. But every try seemed to drag the spotlight back to the confrontation. The public just couldn't forget Crockett's calmness and his meltdown. Memes went viral. Nightly shows replayed the clips, and the phrase "one statement takedown" became her nickname. Behind closed doors, Huckabee griped. He insisted he hadn't lost, that his points were still valid, that the media was twisting things. But even he had to admit that something had slipped away from him in that room. He'd faced countless debates, given talks and speeches with ease. But this was different. Millions saw him stumble, and once you see that, it's hard to forget. Crockett herself felt the pressure of new expectations. She knew that the more attention she got, the more people would watch her every move. Everything she said in future hearings would be compared to the standard she'd set. Some warned her that rising too fast invites trouble, that opponents would look for weaknesses even harder. But Crockett didn't back down. She kept doing her work as if nothing had changed, reminding everyone that good leadership is about consistency, not just viral moments. Experts started writing opinion pieces dissecting the showdown. They talked about speaking well, power, and gender in politics. Some claimed Huckabee underestimated her because she was young. Others pointed to the culture clash between his focus on right and wrong and her focus on responsibility. What they all agreed on was that something had changed in that hearing. Regular people talked about it in their living rooms too. Some felt good watching her stand her ground. Others saw in Huckabee's stumble a reminder that even pros can screw up when faced with the truth. Families argued at dinner, coworkers replayed clips during lunch, and students acted out the scene in class. It became more than just a hearing. It was a cultural moment. Even with all the buzz, Crockett stayed careful. She knew that letting the moment define her would be a mistake. Instead, she used it to help her bigger goals, using the attention not for herself, but to talk about the issues she cared about. At rallies, she reminded supporters that viral moments don't last, but real change takes work. The crowd cheered not just because of what she'd said, but how she'd said it. For Huckabee, the effect stuck around. Even though he went back to public events, critics saw a weakness in him they hadn't seen before. Supporters backed him, but the cracks were clear. In politics, image is everything, and one slip-up can leave scars that speeches can't easily hide. The difference between them became a lesson in style as much as anything else. One relied on volume and tradition, the other on calm and clarity. One tried to overpower, the other to take apart. And in that difference, people started asking deeper questions about what kind of leaders they wanted in the future. As the weeks went by, people didn't forget that hearing. It lived in headlines, online, and in the quiet respect of those who saw something they wanted in public life in Crockett's coys. And even though Huckabee kept going, saying he had more to say, that moment followed him into every new conversation. Because sometimes history doesn't remember every speech, every question, every answer. Sometimes it remembers a single line, said with a clarity that cuts through the noise. And in that room, on that day, Jasmine Crockett gave history such a line. Huckabee hoped the fuss would die down fast, but no such luck. The more he tried to forget it, the more Jasmine Crockett's words stuck to him. Radio hosts brought it up. Morning shows played the clip again and again. Even friendly hosts had a tough time defending him without admitting how sharp her reply was. It was like Crockett's one line was now a permanent part of political history. Crockett, on the other hand, handled the attention like a pro. She didn't go chasing interviews. Instead, she only spoke when she had to, often steering the conversation back to the issues instead of personal attacks. This made her seem different than those who thrive on drama. Her calm became her strength. Her supporters flooded social media, praising not just what she said, but how she said it. No yelling, no anger, just clear and calm conviction. To them, it felt like a new way to deal with lies, not with shouting, but with patience and facts. In political circles, Crockett was suddenly the one to watch. People wondered if she might become a national figure sooner than anyone expected. They knew moments like these could skyrocket a career, especially when they hit home with people who don't usually watch congressional hearings. The more the clip spread, the more seriously she was taken by those in charge. Huckabee's team saw the problem. They tried to say Crockett's response was planned, not real. They said her words were just for show, not the truth. But none of it worked, because the video told a different story. People saw a guy pushing too hard and a woman who wouldn't back down. The image was stronger than any spin. What Huckabee couldn't admit was how frustrating it was to lose control. He'd always relied on his authority to win arguments, but this time it didn't work. Crockett's words popped his bubble, leaving him exposed. As time passed, commentators said the exchange showed a shift in politics. Younger voices were challenging old rules, and authority wasn't automatic anymore. It had to be earned. Crockett showed that shift not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Her office was swamped with messages. Some were from longtime fans, others were from strangers who wanted to know more about her. Of course, there were also critics, some being nasty, some trying to scare her. Crockett handled both with the same calm she showed on TV. Another person might have been freaked out by the media, but Crockett ignored it. She told her staff that the work was
was more important than the news coverage. Viral clips fade, she said, but the problems we're talking about don't. Staying focused on that helped her avoid playing to the cameras. Still, the exchange changed how even her enemies saw her. They couldn't just dismiss her as loud anymore. Now she was someone who could land a serious punch. For Huckabee, it meant he had to change how he dealt with her. He knew he couldn't underestimate her again, because one wrong move could end up online forever. The story got people's attention outside of politics, too. Writers compared it to big historical moments where someone changed the game with just a few words. Teachers used it to show students how being clear can beat being loud. Even comedians made jokes about the awkward silence after Huckabee messed up. It proved that politics is about more than just policies. It's about how you act. It's not just about what you say, but how it comes across. Crockett's ability to stay calm while tearing down an argument made her look good, while Huckabee's inability to bounce back made him look bad. Both sides learned a lesson that day. As Crockett got back to work, she knew she had a bigger platform than before. She chose how to use it carefully. Instead of chasing cameras, she wanted to make sure there was real substance behind the moment. She knew if she let herself be known only for that one exchange, she'd be just a headline, not a leader. For Huckabee, the path was different. He had to face the fact that you never fully recover from a public mistake like that. He tried to move on, but someone always brought it up. His speeches always had a reminder of what happened. So the exchange lived on, not just as a video, but as a symbol. It showed changing times, the need for leaders who focus on facts instead of shouting, and how even the best speakers can mess up when they're faced with the truth. It became a moment people studied, talked about, and remembered long after the news moved on. Because in the end, history isn't just about big laws or fancy speeches. Sometimes it's made in the silence after one well-chosen line, a silence that says it all.
The weeks after that exchange were wild. What started as a single line between Mike Huckabee and Jasmine Crockett turned into a huge story all over the place, on TV, in podcasts, everywhere. People were hooked, not just on the fight itself, but on what it meant. The old rules about who gets to say what's right and wrong in politics were being questioned. Crockett's team knew right away they couldn't control the story anymore. It took off. Social media chopped it up, replaying Huckabee's surprised face over and over, adding funny captions and memes. Young people saw Crockett as real, something they don't often see on TV. Even older folks who didn't know her before saw she was breaking a mold. Huckabee, on the other hand, was trying to get back on his feet. He kept showing up in public, but Crockett's words followed him. He tried to make jokes, saying it was all blown out of proportion, but the more he laughed, the more people replayed the clip. It just didn't work because the video told a different story. Crockett didn't make a big deal about going viral. When asked in interviews, she didn't take credit and instead talked about things like responsibility and fairness. This annoyed some people who wanted her to brag about herself. Instead, she came off as confident and down to earth, which got her even more attention. People in her party were watching closely. They were saying she had what it takes to handle pressure. It wasn't just that she could stand up to someone, but that she could change the whole game. Huckabee thought he could put her on the defensive, but he ended up looking weaker while she looked stronger. Behind the scenes, people were trying to figure out what happened. Some said it was Crockett's timing. Others said it was because she didn't get emotional. Still others pointed to the fact that she was real. It wasn't rehearsed. It felt like she really believed what she was saying. That hit people harder than fancy speeches. Huckabee's people knew they had to do something. They started saying Crockett was just using the situation to her advantage, that she was being rude to her elders to get attention. They kept repeating the word disrespect. But that didn't really work either because people could just watch the clip and decide for themselves. Many thought Huckabee was the one being disrespectful by thinking he could push her around without consequences. What surprised everyone was how long this lasted. Most viral videos disappear after a few days. This one stuck around for weeks, even months. It was mentioned in speeches, talked about in classrooms and churches. In some places, it became a symbol of women standing up for themselves. In others, it showed a generational shift. Every time it was retold, it stuck in people's minds even more. For Crockett, this meant she had to be careful. People were watching her every move. Anything she said would be compared to that moment. She knew this and was extra careful with her work. She didn't want to be a one-hit wonder, but a leader who could make a real difference. She kept talking about important issues in hearings, using facts and stories from her community, and kept her cool. People noticed that she never tried to recreate that moment with Huckabee. She wasn't chasing the next viral video. This made people respect her even more because it showed she was serious and focused on more than just making a show. Huckabee's path was different. The fight changed things for him. He was still respected in some circles, but even his supporters knew he'd been
caught off guard. He wasn't as confident as he used to be. People who knew him well could see the difference. Political experts later said it wasn't just about the one exchange, but about who has the power. There are always moments that change the way things work. Crockett grabbed one without planning to, just by being honest. She changed the rules and showed that you have to earn respect, not just expect it because of who you are. This went beyond politics. People in magazines and online said it was part of a bigger story about power shifting in America. Young leaders challenging old ways, women taking charge, and people telling the truth in a world of spin. Crockett became a symbol of these changes. Even far from Washington, people knew the story. Teachers showed the clip to talk about communication and power. Activists used it as an example of how to speak up without being mean. Parents used it to teach their kids about courage and the importance of speaking with conviction. The key thing about that moment was the silence afterward. That silence said more than words ever could. It showed Huckabee's weakness, Crockett's strength, and the fact that things had changed right before everyone's eyes. As time went on, neither of them could escape that exchange. For Huckabee, it was a reminder that you can't always be on top. For Crockett, it was proof that one voice can change everything. And so, the story continues. A reminder that history isn't always made by big speeches. Sometimes, it's made by a single sentence, followed by a silence that still echoes.
The room got crowded again. Bright lights, mics on, everything ready to record. Mike Huckabee sat up straight, papers stacked next to him, a water bottle untouched. He looked like he was ready for a fight. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett sat calmly, pen by her notebook, a steady look in her eyes. The room seemed to lean in, waiting for her to speak. Huckabee cleared his throat, letting everyone know he was jumping back in. "Ma'am, I'll keep this short," he said, which meant he wouldn't. "Congresswoman Crockett is known for being smart, but smart isn't always right." He let that hang in the air. "I have here a list of things she's said that don't match what she's done, and today, I'm asking the questions she's avoided." Jasmine didn't even blink. "Ask away," she said, her voice and eyes steady. Huckabee held up the first page, the sound of the paper amplified by the mics. "You've said leadership is about helping people, but you've chosen fighting over getting along. Last month, you turned down chances to work with both parties. Is that helping or just showing off?" Jasmine looked at him for a beat. "Helping is getting results, not pretending these mics are a game. If working together means letting shady stuff slide, I'm not doing it. If it means staying quiet when the truth needs to be told, I won't be quiet. The record shows I deliver. Your recording shows you twisting things." A few people chuckled in the back, quickly silenced by staff. Huckabee forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "See," he said, "she avoids the point and hides behind fancy words. Let's get specific." He flipped to another page. "You talked about duty, then refused to support a bill that would have created an ethics board you didn't control. Why block duty if you care about it?" Jasmine leaned into her mic, calm as ever. "I voted against a weak group set up to look like it's watching things while protecting the very people it's supposed to check. You know I suggested changes to give it some real power. You also know you can dress up a crummy support in a fancy costume. It's still an officer. If you want duty, you want teeth. If you want protection, you want a group that smiles." Huckabee's fingers tightened on the page. The chair creaked slightly, picked up by the mics. He put the paper down, picked up another, trying a new angle. "You talk about rules," he said, "but your attitude disrespects tradition. Your words hurt trust. Do you realize your approach divides the people? Trust breaks down when leaders lie, not when the truth is spoken clearly. Division isn't caused by pointing out a problem, it's caused by refusing to fix it. If tradition was enough, we wouldn't need laws. If respect was enough, we wouldn't need courts. The people aren't divided because I speak up. They're divided because too many refuse to listen." Huckabee reached for his water bottle, touched it, didn't drink, and set it back down. He smiled again, softer, the kind of smile that hides pain. "Here's what I see," he said. "I see someone who's good at talking, but doesn't walk the walk. You blame, you act, you get attention, but do you build anything?" Jasmine looked at the mics, then back at him. "I build with votes, with laws, with deadlines met and budgets balanced," she said. "Showing office for people who can't even read the laws they're holding. Blame is what you call an inconvenient fact when it refuses to go somewhere else. If you want to talk about action, let's remember the promises that died before the applause stopped." A ripple went through the media row, quiet but noticeable. Huckabee tensed, then recovered. He leaned closer to the mic, the reflex of an announcer kicking in. "You still haven't answered the question everyone asked last time," he said. "Are your ethics as strong as you say, or are they just a front for a system-built image?"
Jasmine didn't look down. "My ethics? They're not for you to approve," she said. "I think about them when I'm alone. The system didn't pick me, people did. You gave up your right to argue when you tried to judge my ideas. That's not guidance, it's just you
being stuck up. He twitched a bit, then grabbed the next paper. Fine, let's talk numbers, he said. You want transparency, but money goes to groups that support you. Do you know every person who donates? Have you checked every dollar? Or do you only want transparency from your enemies? Jasmine flipped a page without looking up. When there were problems, we gave the money back and said why, she stated. You know that. We made our rules public and had someone check them independently. You know that too. Transparency isn't a press release. It's a way of doing things that can be checked. You're not asking a question, you're just trying to label me. Huckabee's mouth tightened. The committee head almost jumped in, then didn't. Huckabee switched gears. You say you're not scared of the truth, he said. Then say it now. Do you think people who disagree with you can be honest, or do you automatically assume they're bad? If disagreeing was a deal breaker, this place would be empty, Jasmine replied. I assume people are doing their best until they prove otherwise. And when they do wrong, I don't excuse it because they're my friend or because that's how things have always been. You want to talk about honesty? Start answering your own questions directly and stop thinking that more words means a better argument. The recorder soaked up the moment. Huckabee felt her words land, heard the room react, and reached for anger like it was an old coat. You keep acting like I'm exaggerating, he barked. You refuse to admit that your attitude turns millions of people off. You're not a judge, but you pass judgment. You're not a priest, but you make moral claims. Who gave you this authority? The voters, Jasmine replied. And the oath I took? And the fact that I do my homework before I speak up. Authority isn't a crown. It's something you earn. You earn it with work and you lose it with excuses. If you don't like the judgment, change the evidence. The crowd shifted again, the air thinner, the tension higher. Huckabee flipped to a page he'd saved for last, hoping it would throw her off. You were on a team that looked at a project that flopped, he said. You praised its setup, but the numbers were awful. Do you take responsibility for supporting something that failed? Jasmine nodded once, like she'd been waiting for this. Yes, she said. The original plan didn't work, and I said so at the time. We restarted with oversight from the community and ways to measure progress. We moved money around when the first quarter didn't meet goals. The new numbers are better. Leading isn't pretending you never made a bad call, it's fixing the problem before it's too late. Responsibility is saying, I was wrong when you need to, and here's how we're fixing it when it's time. For a second, Huckabee seemed relieved, as if an admission would soften her. Then he realized she'd turned that admission into a plan and put it back on him. He leaned in, trying another tactic. You make it seem easy, he said, like it's a straight line from mistake to fix. But politics isn't a lab. It's about people, and people want humility, maybe less attack and more of a helping hand. Jasmine's voice softened, but it wasn't a sign of weakness. Humility is telling the truth even when it hurts you too, she said. The hand you're talking about is only useful if it's clean. Voters are tired of being asked to hold hands with people who always have their fingers in the cookie jar. If you want to offer a hand, put something honest in it, not a lecture about how voters' expectations are too high. The chair finally spoke up, reminding them of the time, then stopped when they both nodded that they were almost done. Huckabee straightened his papers, trying to look organized, and tried to get back on moral high ground. You expect a lot from others, he said. Do you accept that you'll be held to the same standard when your own side messes up? When being pure means losing, will you still talk this way? Jasmine didn't look away. I'm not selling perfection. I'm selling honesty and a plan. Compromise isn't corruption when it's written down, measured, and can be undone if it fails. Corruption is calling everything a compromise while money changes hands and promises are broken. If being honest means losing my platform, I'll take the quiet and keep my conscience clear. Huckabee looked down at his papers, then at her, then at the cameras. He seemed to be searching for a knockout punch, a way to put her on the defensive, a phrase that would change everything. He couldn't find it, so he went back to the question he still thought had power. He paused longer than he meant to. Do you really think your morals are beyond question, or are you just better at defending them? Jasmine let the silence hang long enough to show who was in control. She spoke softly, her words precise. My morals aren't an act. They're the choices I make when nobody's watching. Question them all you want, but stop confusing your need for a catchy line with my need for a clear direction. I'm not better at defending them. I'm better at living by them. A low murmur went through the room, the kind of sound people make when they hear something they'll be repeating later.
Huckabee sighed, sounding like he was giving up, but trying to be patient. He stacked his papers neatly, squared them up, and tried one last time to make his point. Millions disagree with you, he said. Millions were offended by your tone before. Anything to say to them? Jasmine turned slightly to face the cameras, keeping eye contact. It was so smooth, like a planned move. I'll always disagree respectfully, argue without being mean, and listen without pretending to believe lies. I won't let anyone
anyone turn morality into a weapon that only points one way. If my calmness offends you, ask yourself why loud men feel safer than clear women. Then check the facts. The leader raised the gavel, paused, then lowered it, like hitting it might ruin the vibe. Huckabee sat still, thinking if speaking would just make things worse. He spoke anyway. "You nailed this moment," he said. "But moments disappear. What's left when the cameras are off?" Jasmine didn't smile. "The work," she replied, "and the silence when even my critics admit the score's changed. You wanted me to prove my morals. I said then, you don't get to judge them. You still don't, but you can measure the results. They don't need applause, just honesty." He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the leader, then down at his hands. The leader raised the gavel again, ready to end it, when someone brought a sealed binder to the microphone. "New info for the record," he said, "time-stamped, real, and about the last question." The binder went down the table. Cameras turned, everyone leaned forward. Huckabee looked at the folder like a sailor spotting a reef too late. Jasmine didn't reach for it. She didn't need to. She just kept watching him, steady, waiting, as the leader opened it and started reading. The room felt like it was tilting toward the next moment that would be replayed a million times. The seal cracked quietly, the sound loud in the microphone. The leader slid out a page, reading left to right, then back, like he couldn't believe what it said. Everyone leaned forward, holding their breath, pens ready. The leader cleared his throat, speaking carefully. "For the record," he said, "this is info from an outside group. It has results from the community test. Representative Crockett mentioned letters and comments from groups involved in the restart. Everyone here agrees it goes in the record." Huckabee moved slightly, like he wanted to stand but couldn't. The leader kept going. Summary: the test didn't do well at first. After changes, it met or beat goals in 4 areas: school attendance, faster permit times for small businesses, more eviction help, and benefit appeals closed in 30 days for the first time in 2 years. Reporters looked at the numbers. The cameras loved it. Huckabee grabbed his water but didn't drink. Jasmine didn't move. The leader turned a page. "There's also a statement from a radio show 2 months after the restart, praising the fix as responsible," he said. "It's from Governor Mike Huckabee." People made a noise. Not quite a gasp or a laugh, but something in between. Huckabee turned red. "That segment," he started, "was about fixing things, not agreeing with her. It's all about context. You can't twist my words. Read the whole thing." Jasmine said softly, not to the leader, not to the cameras, but to the space between them. The leader read, "This is a good update. It admits mistakes, fixes them, and takes responsibility. If more projects did this, fewer would fail." Huckabee's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. He was choosing between excuses and silence. He tried both. "I was speaking generally," he said. "This city doesn't like admitting mistakes. I support anyone who tries to do better. That doesn't mean I agree with Representative Crockett. Her tone is still bad." The leader looked at the next page. "The appendix has a letter from your office, Governor, to a business group encouraging them to work with the restart, calling it, quote, a serious plan, unquote."
Huckabee almost reached for the mic, hand hovering like over a hot stove. "Working together isn't giving up," he said. "I'm not on trial for backing improvements. I'm here to ask Representative Crockett if she thinks her actions bring together the people she says she serves." Jasmine's steady gaze and tone said, "I believe in telling the truth when you can hear it. If you want unity, stop thinking being comfortable is the same as being healed. Stop thinking being nice is the same as being honest. The numbers changed. Governor, your letter says so." A murmur went through the press area. The leader turned the page. "To finish up," he said, "the Oversight Office says the second part had an outside audit, reports every 3 months, and people from the community on the panel. The office didn't find any shady stuff in buying or contracts." Huckabee grabbed at the last chance he had. "Okay," he said, "so you found a plan that got better after admitting a mistake, which is good, but the question is, do your morals match what you say, or are you just good at defending yourself when the cameras are rolling?" Jasmine put her fingertips together like it was a place to rest, not a trap to run from. "My morals aren't for show," she said. "They're there every day. They're there on tough Tuesdays when we vote. They're there on ugly Fridays when the inbox is full. They're there on Sunday nights when no one's watching and I have to pick between easy and right. If you want to test them, look at what happens. If you want to judge them, you'll need to look in a mirror. I can't give you that." The leader looked at Huckabee. "You said you had one last question." Governor Huckabee gathered his papers, straightened them up, and tried to use the speech he'd planned before the report game, trying to make it fit a room that had changed while he wasn't looking. "Representative Crockett," he said, "millions of people who watched the first part felt ignored by how you acted. They thought your confidence turned into disrespect. Do you agree that your attitude has consequences? Do you agree that people who don't agree with you don't deserve to feel small?" "No one deserves to feel small," Jasmine said. "What makes people feel small isn't how I act. It's a system that pretends to help them, but just uses them as a background. I don't think being comfortable is the same as being caring. I don't think being loud is the same as being valuable, and I don't think feelings are the same as facts. If
someone felt insulted by me being calm, I ask them to look at the facts with me, then tell me where the numbers are wrong. Huckabee pushed. And if they still feel unseen, then I keep working, she said, and I keep listening, and I don't lie to make them feel good for a minute, but hurt them for good. Feeling good is a couch. Policy is a building. One falls apart under pressure, one holds it up. I'm building the second one. The leader lifted the page again. Just to be clear, the leader said, the oversight report also has stories from people who were going to be kicked out but weren't, thanks to the program. From small business owners who got permits in weeks instead of months, from parents whose appeals finally got answered. These are part of the record now. The room felt the weight of those stories without hearing any names. The details of everyday life filled the room more than any slogan could. Huckabee's shoulders dropped a little. He could feel the camera watching. He tried one last thing. You're talking about results today, he said. But what about tomorrow? What about the next plan that doesn't work? What about the day you don't have a convenient letter to show? Are you ready to accept that your famous line isn't enough when the numbers go the other way? Jasmine nodded once. It's never enough, she said. The line is a door. The work is the house. When things go wrong, I say the 3 words I said before. I was wrong. Then I bring the fix, the plan, and the people who will make sure I do it. And I show the proof. If you want things perfect, go to a museum. If you want progress, go to the problem and keep moving. The leader looked down the table. Time's up for this part, he said. We'll hear a last statement from each governor. Huckabee took a breath and used the rhythm he'd taught to so many audiences, the one that made crowds nod even when they didn't understand. America needs to be humble, he said. It needs less certainty and more listening. It needs leaders who don't make a name for themselves by fighting. I hope Representative Crockett remembers that the loudest clip isn't the deepest truth, and I hope people will ask for a kind of politics that helps before it hurts. The leader nodded to Jasmine. She didn't stand, she didn't lean in, she just spoke. Low voice, clear words. People deserve both humility and passion. Humility in admitting when we fail, passion in dealing with it. They deserve leaders who show the plan before they give the speech. They deserve leaders who treat results like promises, not decorations. I won't apologize for being calm. I won't think being quiet is the same as being weak, and I won't let my morals be judged by people who think attention is the same as being good, Governor. You asked what's left when the clip stops. What's left is the rent paid, the permit approved, the appeal answered, the Tuesday vote, the Friday inbox cleared. That's the only applause I care about.
The leaders slammed the gavel. The committee thanked everyone. The leaders started to talk. A staffer at the table raised a hand. One last thing. The staffer mentioned a final attachment in the submission, a quick email exchange from the week after the quoted part. The sender said, thanks for the change in direction. They mentioned critics would bash tone over facts and said to ignore the BS and post the figures monthly. The signature said Mike Huckabee. The room seemed to spin. Huckabee closed his eyes for a second, like he was praying, but sounded like he felt bad. Context, he mumbled. Read all of it, Jasmine said, staring at him. The leader read the lines as they were. Short, simple, blunt. When he was done, the silence came back. Not tense, but a heavy quiet, like everyone knew how it would end. Cameras zoomed in on their faces. One calm, one uneasy. The angle the editors love because it tells the whole story. Before the anchor spoke, Huckabee grabbed his water and finally drank, but it wasn't enough to save him. He put the glass down carefully, like any noise would make it worse. He looked at Jasmine, saw no bragging, only the same steady look he'd seen for hours, and realized he'd never be in control of that room again. The leader hit the gavel. Meeting over. Reporters exploded with questions, crowding the aisle. Questions flew, but no one had answers. For a second, the lights seemed brighter, the mics hotter. Jasmine slowly gathered her papers, pushed the packet to the edge for copying, and stood up. Huckabee stayed put, the pages in front of him looking like a battlefield map from the old days. As she got to the aisle, a camera waited for her to look at it. She didn't. She simply spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. A final line that hit home. Keep the clip if you want, she said. Keep the numbers if you're serious. The first one will be a hit tonight. The second one will still matter tomorrow. The microphones picked it up, the gallery heard it, and somewhere between the exit and outside, the story wrote itself. Not with yelling, but with proof and a quiet that sticks around.